I've never worked in the cement industry, but I could see how someone who does would view it as a fairly noble occupation. After all, you're providing people with construction material. You're basically playing a part in building the world in a time-honoured trade dating back thousands of years. I mean, concrete is the second most consumed resource on the planet, behind water. For you, cement is one of the most virtuous materials on the planet. It represents human ingenuity, perseverance, and progress. It is your moral obligation to share it with the world, and you should take pride in fulfilling that duty. You view things like concrete shoes as a terrible evil, a human corruption and perversion of the purity of the naturally virtuous cement. You'd also be terribly upset to hear about a cement company that was complicit in crimes against humanity. How could this be possible, you might wonder? They must have knowingly mixed the cement with faulty or hazardous materials or something like that. But no, the cement itself never hurt anyone. This story is much crazier than that. Founded in 1833 in France, Lafarge is one of the world's largest cement manufacturers. Their headquarters are in Paris, but they have subsidiary companies all over the world. One of these subsidiaries is Lafarge Cement Syria. In 2008, Lafarge spent around $680 million to construct a cement plant in the Jalabia region of northern Syria. Now, I haven't really paid much attention to the news over the past 10 years, but based on what I've heard, Syria isn't exactly at the top of the list of countries I'd consider making a significant business investment in. I feel like that's something you'd probably want a good level of stability for. In 2011, Syria entered a civil war, which does to a country's stability what an unsupervised toddler does to a house of cards whose foundations are built on biscuits. Lafarge Cement Syria continued business as usual, albeit with the knowledge that the country around them was descending into armed conflict and various factions were competing for control of territories all across the country. This puts the average person in quite an awkward position. You might support one side over the others, but unless you're willing to give your life to fighting for that cause, then the best bet for your safety and the safety of your family is probably keeping your head down and not getting involved either way. Of course, it's rarely that simple, is it? You might reside in an area controlled by Mr. Blue. You might be sympathetic to Mr. Blue. You might not be, but you'd better be nice to Mr. Blue while he's in your backyard. You might even find yourself in a situation where you're forced to help Mr. Blue in some way. That's all fine until Mr. Blue is driven out of town by Mr. Red, and Mr. Red might have some serious concerns regarding your prior relationship with Mr. Blue. What I'm saying is, misery acquaints a man with strange bedfellows. Lafarge Cement Syria's first step down the path of getting into bed with strange fellows occurred shortly after the Civil War began. In order to make cement, they needed raw materials, and now the supply of these materials was under the control of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, also known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, also known as ISIS, who have a pretty infamous reputation across the world. Unless Lafarge Cement Syria changed its supplier, it would now be buying the materials from ISIS, essentially giving money to a terrorist organization, and in order to continue making cement, that's what they did. It didn't end there though. Over the next several years, Lafarge Cement Syria had all sorts of dealings with terrorist groups. They began to make payments of what was essentially protection money to armed factions like ISIS and al-Nusra Front. These payments were to ensure that the concrete plant could continue to operate and that its employees could pass safely through territories controlled by the factions. ISIS literally provided them with passes that would allow them to go through their checkpoints. Here's an example of one. The translation reads, "To the brothers at the checkpoints of Kara Kozak Bridge, may Allah keep you safe. Kindly allow the employees of Lafarge Cement Company to pass through after completing necessary work and after paying their dues to us. May Allah reward you." Now you might be thinking, hey look, they were in an awkward position. They were just doing what they had to survive in that environment. Sometimes hard choices need to be made for the good of cement. But it didn't end there either. Lafarge Cement Syria eventually came to an understanding that to best incentivize ISIS to protect their business, they would have to align ISIS's interests with their own. Instead of just paying protection money, they agreed to make payments to ISIS based on the volume of cement they sold. This meant that the more cement they sold, the more money ISIS would make. So now ISIS had a vested interest in making sure these guys did the best business possible. Then Lafarge Cement Syria made clear to ISIS how that could be achieved. Look, It's like this. Cement is being imported into this country from Turkey, and it's often sold cheaper than the stuff we make here in Syria. That means they're undercutting our profits, which means they're undercutting your profits. If you want it to stop, either outlaw the sale of imported cement in the territories you control, or impose a tax on them, and we can raise our prices. Lafarge Cement Syria continued to make payments to various armed factions until 2014, when the Jalabia plant was evacuated in the face of the Syrian conflict. ISIS then took over the plant and started selling the cement the company had produced. It's estimated ISIS made over $3 million from these sales. In 2016, France launched an investigation into Lafarge after a journalist had published a report detailing, well, basically all of what I just told you. The French court inquiry found that it was all true, and that between 2012 and 2014, Lafarge Cement Syria had paid up to 13 million euros to various armed factions, including ISIS, despite the extensive worldwide coverage of the heinous acts these groups were committing. In making these payments to allow the plant's continued operation, Lafarge Cement Syria had made about $70 million in revenue. In 2018, 8 former Lafarge executives, 2 of whom were former CEOs, were charged with supporting terrorists and endangering the lives of their employees. The French Supreme Court also charged Lafarge with complicity in crimes against humanity, basically saying that by providing financial support to ISIS, they were complicit in the crimes of ISIS. The resolution to these cases is still pending, but as Lafarge also operates in the United States, they found themselves in trouble with the US Department of Justice too. The Americans charged Lafarge with providing material support and resources to foreign terrorist organizations, which is the first time the US Department of Justice has used this charge against a corporation, and to my knowledge, the only time. In 2022, Lafarge pled guilty to this and agreed to pay $777.8 million in fines and forfeiture. In the US, Lafarge has also been sued by various groups. For example, in 2023, hundreds of Yazidi Americans launched a class action lawsuit against Lafarge for supporting violence carried out by terrorist groups. The lawsuit is led by Nobel Peace Prize winner Nadia Murad, who was held captive by ISIS in 2014. And that's how you know the world has really gone to hell, when even the noble pursuit of cement is tainted by the black hand of human evil. I hereby dedicate this video to the virtues of cement, and to all those that choose to create rather than destroy. It is a choice I myself remain committed to with the continuing creation of these videos. If you liked this one, you can watch some of my other ones or subscribe to see a new one every week. If you'd like to support me monetarily, you can join my Patreon or channel membership, and I promise the money won't end up funding a terrorist organization, as I ceased doing that after researching the topic of this video. I'll see you for another video next week, and until then, stay safe. In 2022, Lafarge pled guilty to this, for God's sake. They were just doing what they had to do. What? Jalabia. Am I right in saying that? Jalabia. Yeah, Jalabia. Da da da.